My name is Corey, and in this lecture we're going to be talking about optimizing your gigs for Fiverr success. So, the first thing when it comes to creating a gig is your gig title. The first thing you have to consider is the length of the gig title. Fiverr only allows a certain amount of characters, and I believe it's something like 80 characters, but you should be doing gig titles that are very short. So the shorter the better. Ideally, you want a gig titles between 15 to 60 characters. I find this works best on Fiverr. I find gig titles that are shorter, rank better, and picked up more often in the searches on Fiverr. So it's a big deal, okay? The next thing you have to consider are the keywords you're going to be using in your gig title. So instead of just saying, I will install WordPress or I will set up WordPress, use both words, install and setup. Say, I will install, set up WordPress. I know it doesn't sound very readable, doesn't make sense grammatically, but it will be picked up in both searches when people are searching install WordPress or set up WordPress. The next thing you have to consider is the gig category. Obviously, you have to put your gig in the correct category for it to be picked up by the right searches or the right users. Okay, so you want to choose a category that's relevant. Research. See what other gigs that are similar to yours, what categories they're using, and choose the same ones. Later, when I talk about specific gigs, I will go over which category to use for each gig, so you won't have to worry about that. The next thing to consider is if they're in demand. So the most popular categories on Fiverr right now are graphic design, online marketing, advertising, video and animation, writing and translation. The next thing we're going to be talking about are gig photos. So some gigs are able to have a gig cover photo. Okay, here are some examples of some really good ones on Fiverr. So they work kind of like a Facebook timeline photo. And here are the categories that are allowed to have these cover photos. You'll notice that not every category you choose will allow you to upload a cover photo. So you can upload cover photos for fun and bizarre, graphics and design, advertising, lifestyle, gifts, video animation. Okay, your cover photos show your personality, so it should be either a photo of yourself. So if you're doing video testimonials, it should be a photo of yourself, or it should show off your work. So if you're doing graphics and design, you should put your work in your cover photo because it's a lot larger than your gig photo. And put effort into it. If you don't know how to create a photo, you don't have Photoshop or anything like that, buy a gig and have someone else do it for you. Another thing that you're allowed to have on Fiverr is a gig gallery, okay, and your gig photo. This is not as important as your gig video, which we'll be talking about in the next section of this lecture. But if you don't know how to make one, again, hire someone on Fiverr. They'll do it for you. And be sure to turn live portfolio on. So if you're selling logos or things like that, it's really important to have a live portfolio. What that basically is when you upload your work to the buyer and you deliver the gig, you can choose to show it on your portfolio. Now you have to enable this under My Gigs, and I'll show you how to do that later in the course. The upload dimensions for the gig photos are very strange. Those are dimensions right there. I do not know why Fiverr does this, but it's very annoying. And if you have a photo that's smaller than that, Fiverr will not allow you to upload it. Ideally, you should attractively and briefly list all the features of your gig on your gig photo. Now, the gig video. This is the most important thing. I'm going to be talking about this later in the next lecture. I will not be talking about it in this lecture because I want to have an entire lecture just talking about the gig video. That's how important I think it is, and you need it for every gig you create on Fiverr. There's no question about that. Next thing is the gig description. So it depends on what you're selling. And I'll be talking about gig descriptions for the gigs in the next section of this course. You're limited to 1,200 characters, but use them all. Even though it's very limited, don't just put a few sentences. You want to include as much information as you can. If you have the space, include an FAQ. I love doing this for all my gigs. I like to have a frequently asked questions section in all my gig descriptions, just so I don't get as many messages asking the same thing over and over. Bullet points are great. You want to highlight all the features of your gig. Use the bold, use the size, use the highlight, use the italicize that Fiverr allows you to use when you're creating a gig description. and include disclaimers and special notes. So if there are things you will not do, so for example, if you're doing video testimonials again, and you don't want to be doing testimonials for pharmacy or dating sites, you should put that in your gig description. And miscellaneous. So we can have gig tags. Look at what the highest rated similar gigs use. Keep search phrases together in tags. So instead of separating WordPress, comma, install, comma, put a keyword or a tag as install WordPress. So example, like I just said, so Twitter followers, not Twitter, comma, followers. Use related tags to capture related searches. So if you're selling Twitter followers, don't just put Twitter followers in your tags. Put retweets, put favorites. Those are things people are searching also on Fiverr. And if your gig may show up in the search results, and it's a relevant gig that people may still want to purchase your gig even though they weren't searching for it. Another thing to consider is the gig duration. Now, when you're starting out, ideally you want to set it to a day. I know it sounds crazy, but you want to have your gig duration for a day. That will put the express tag on your gig, and it will really help you get those initial wave of sales and initial reviews to help get the ball rolling for yourself. Also, Fiverr grants you a 1 additional day to deliver gigs. You have late time, so even if you think you're not able to deliver your gigs in a day, you actually have more than 24 hours to deliver your gig. You have 24 hours, then you have an additional 24 hours of late time. However, do not abuse that. If you go over the 48 hours, the buyer can cancel at any time, and you will lose that money, and you will also be left with negative feedback on your gig. So you don't want that to happen. Also, I'm going to be talking about outsourcing gigs later in the next section of this course. So you will obviously have to set your gig duration to the duration that it takes your suppliers to deliver their work to you so that you can deliver it to your buyer. And then lastly, we have instructions to buyers. This is really important too. Here's a sample of what I use for all my gigs that I create on Fiverr. You guys can use it word for word if you like. It doesn't really matter. Also, as you can see at the end of the description, I'm upselling. I'm going, you should check out my profile. I sell also this gig. And that will help you get those additional sales and help you upsell to your buyers. So that's it for this course, guys. I hope you took a lot away from it. Again, I will be going more into detail when I talk about specific gigs for each of these sections. So I was being very general in this lecture, but don't worry about it. We will get much more specific in future lectures. Thanks a lot, guys, for paying attention, and see you in the next lecture.